Hello and welcome to the First Citizens You First series, Improved Decision Making and Stress Management. I'm your host, Chuck Walkendorfer, President of Distribution of Think2Perform. We are doing the 7th session today on the values exercise. First Citizens has been bringing this series to you. This is the 7th in a series of 12 to help improve decision making and stress management during these times of uncertainty. Think2Perform is a business and sports performance firm based out of Minneapolis. We work with executives, athletes, and business owners to improve decision making under pressure. So we work with everybody from American Express to United Health Group, Wells Fargo, the FBI, doctors and nurses in surgery, pro and college athletes. And one of the things you can know about decision making and performance in any area of life, I don't care what you do for a living, where you live, the color of your skin, male or female, it doesn't matter. Performance in any area of life is a function of three things. It's a function of our talent being things that we're always good at and can never remember learning. So things like math or music or sports, things we had a natural affinity for. Part number two are skills. Skills are things we develop over our lifetime. So I may have had a talent for music, and I developed a skill to play the piano. And the third part of performance is decision making. So it's talent plus skills plus decision making equals performance. And of the three, decision making has twice the impact on performance than talent and skill combined. I'm not suggesting talent and skill don't matter. They just don't matter as much as decision making. And unlike our IQ, which we can't improve, unfortunately, we can become better decision makers. So we make about 35,000 decisions a day. Most of them we don't think about. I don't know if that's surprising to anybody. So how we get dressed in the morning, brushing our teeth. When we used to drive to the office, driving to the office was kind of an autopilot. And we tend to live our lives out of a part of our brain called the basal ganglia. That's the habit center part of our brain. And that frees up a part of our brain called the prefrontal cortex, which is the logical thinking part of our brain to work on the bigger decisions of the day. As it relates to decision making, we don't have to make all 35,000 decisions a day better, but we've probably got to make 2, 3, or 4 each day. And 2 or 3 better decisions a day over the course of a year is 700 to 1,000 better decisions a year. And we're going to be talking today about the values exercise and how values influence our decision making. I am joined by one of my colleagues at Think2Perform, Dave Meldahl. Dave is a senior vice president at Think2Perform and focuses his work on developing leaders and teams through deepened self-awareness, interpersonal effectiveness, and moral and emotional competence. His clients are from a variety of industries, including financial services, biotech, retail, government, and healthcare. Before joining Think2Perform, Dave ran his own coaching, training, and consulting firm for 6 years. Prior to entering consulting, Dave worked over the span of 24 years from American Express Financial Advisors, developing leaders and teams across the United States. As an adjunct faculty member, he also taught the Leadership Foundations course at Montana State University for several years. Thousands of leaders and training participants have put Dave's practical expertise and the insights he prompts into action. Dave is a Bachelor of Arts in Psychology and Communications from Concordia College in Moorhead, Minnesota, and a Master's in Education in Human Resource Development from the University of St. Thomas in Minneapolis, Minnesota. He lives with his beautiful wife, Cindy, in a little slice of paradise in Bozeman, Montana. Welcome, Dave Meldahl, again to this series, this First Citizens You First series.
Thank you, Chuck. Good to be back.
Yeah, we have you helped kick off this journey. We started this series talking about uncertainty in life, and as some of our listeners may remember, as ambiguity or uncertainty increases in life, so does our stress level. And so Dave helped us understand that we are probably at an unprecedented level of uncertainty these days. We've got uncertainty in the stock market, uncertainty in the economy. With COVID, we've got uncertainty in our health. Many of us have job uncertainty with our children going back to school. Given that we're in election year, we have political uncertainty. And so as uncertainty or ambiguity increases in life, so does our stress level. And with a corresponding increase in our stress comes a decrease in our ability to manage our emotions, make good decisions, and manage our behavior. And so Dave helped us understand answering what I call the so what question. So what do we do about that? How do we deal with that? How do we manage our stress? We talked about in our second session some things we can begin doing to manage stress. So things like drinking water, exercise, rest, eating throughout the day, build our stress capacity. And then we talked about how to understand and recognize the level of stress in our lives. In one of our subsequent sessions, we talked about the leadership logic chain. Ray Kelly, one of my colleagues at Think2Perform, introduced us to this. So to become more effective with other people, to have more influence in them in their lives, I've got to do a better job of managing my own behavior. Managing our own behavior begins with me or us making better choices. And making better choices is grounded in self-awareness. So it's almost counterintuitive that for us to build a great relationship with other people, the person we have to pay the most attention to is us. Now here's the fly in the ointment around self-awareness. Those people who are not self-aware, of course, don't know it. Otherwise, they'd be what? Self-aware. Point number two, none of us is self-aware 100% of the time. So it's normal for us to lapse in our self-awareness. But when we do, it affects our decision-making and our performance. So the goal is to improve our self-awareness. When we do that, we make better choices. That enables us to manage our behavior and become more effective with other people. Today, we're going to be going deeper on values and its role in decision-making. And Dave's going to kick this off here in a minute. We introduced in our last session the alignment model. So with Bob Meldahl, one of my colleagues at Think2Perform, we talked about the three frames of the alignment model. Frame one being our ideal self, as it says there on the screen. My ideal self is made up of who I hope to be on my best day. That's my principles, my values, and my beliefs. Principles are universal. So humankind around the globe believe in 4 universal moral principles of integrity, compassion, responsibility, and forgiveness. Values are more personal. So values are shaped by where I was born, when I was born, my gender, my race, my life experience, my family. So Dave's going to talk to us about values here today. And those comprise our moral compass. Those are who we hope to be on our best day. Now, part of the human condition, unfortunately, is none of us is perfect. And so we have in frame 3 is my behavior. My behavior is made up of my thoughts, my feelings, and my actions. That's what everybody else sees. So I tend to judge myself by my intentions. Other people judge us by our behavior. And what we notice when we pay attention to our behavior, and Dave's going to help us get clear today on our ideal self with our values, what we notice sometimes is our behavior falls short of our intention. How do we know that? So when we say things like, that's not what I meant to do, that's not what I meant to say, I'm sorry that it came out that way, right? And the goal here is not about being perfect, because none of us is. The goal is if I can align my behavior with my ideal self more often, and when I make a mistake, if I know my values, and we would add to it our goals in frame 2, I can recognize it and correct it a little quicker. So it's about aligning my behavior with my goals and grounding my goals in my values so that I'm my ideal self more often, and when I'm not, I can take actions to correct that. So Dave, great to have you here with us today. Talk to us about values and its importance on decision-making and stress management.
You got it. So as I was listening, Chuck, it's just great to, as much as we talk about this and seek to live it ourselves, you articulated all that very well. And I want to jump into the frame 3 for a moment, because when we talk about decision making, that's where that's happening, right? Decision making is one of those actions that we're taking, either in our head or physically we're doing something. And the question that comes up then is, well, what am I basing those decisions about my behavior on, right? What's guiding those? And that's the link, right? If I'm making decisions, what am I making those decisions based on? They need to be based, at least in part, on my values if I'm seeking to live out my best self, right? So
Sure.
if I have an intention to be my best self more consistently, like you said, we're not perfect, but if I want to be more consistent than I have been, I want to be really clear about what's most important to me. And I think about a lack of values like a potter who would put some clay on the wheel and press the wheel, the foot pedal, and then the clay would start spinning around and it would take whatever shape it takes, right? If the potter is not doing anything other than spinning the wheel, that's someone who does not have clarity of values, to make that analogy. A potter who shapes that clay, who has a vision of what they want that to become, that ideal piece of art, if you will.
Sure.
Then they're shaping and guiding it. That's what values do. They help us shape and guide our behavior, our decisions, so that we're ultimately creating something that we want to be. That, again, that ideal self. And it's not about being perfect, right? It's about shaping something that is more intentional than not. And we know from our experience, Chuck, with our clients, that while many can say, yeah, I've been through a values clarification exercise before, how many have actually done it in a way that they now can, 6 months later, a year later, 2 years later, remember what those values are?
Right.
So today we want to encourage you and provide you with a process to actually have those get baked in, so that they actually do help you shape your ideal self in those decisions that you're making day to day.
Yeah, I realize, like, when asked, many of us would say, if we're asked about, do we have values? Many of us would say yes. That leads to the second question, which is, what are they?
Right.
And in my experience, it gets kind of fuzzy when you ask that second question.
Real fuzzy.
People ask you, like, people say, well, integrity or honesty, maybe family. What I hear you saying is, I got to get a little clearer about that, and I have to be able to remember them in order to use them. And if I use them, it's going to improve my decision making. Doesn't make me any
Absolutely.
smarter, but it does improve my decision making.
Yes. And the consistency of those decisions being aligned with your best self. Right.
And
That's where.
I also know that, in a business setting, most organizations, most companies, I don't know what the percentage is, probably north of 90%. Most businesses have company values, right? And you and I have both experienced, not to trip anybody up or catch anybody. We work with executives all the time, and we'll ask them, does your firm have values? And they pretty much nod their head and say, yeah, we do. And then that leads to the second question, which is, what are they? And again, we're not trying to catch anybody, but our experience has been most organizations aren't sure what their values are. They understand they're on a plaque somewhere, they're on a newsletter, maybe their website, but the goal is, in order for them to have any impact, we got to remember them and use them. That's going to be the key that we're going to emphasize today.
Right on. Right on. Chuck, there's a quote from the Leadership Challenge that I want to share, and there are 3 parts to this. The first part is, as you see, if you don't believe the messenger, you won't believe the message. So this is about when we're listening to someone else, be it the leader of our organization or leaders of an organization, a parent, a politician. If you don't believe that person, you're not going to believe whatever's coming out of their mouth, right? And then secondly, you can't believe in that person if you don't know what they believe. So great leaders, and I've used that term to mean anyone who influences anyone else, and that's all of us, right? You can't believe in the messenger if you don't know what that person believes. So what's underneath their words, right? What drives their decision making? What are their aspirations? What are their core values? What makes them who they are? If I know that better, I'm more likely to believe what they have to say, to share with me. And then where it really gets interesting, Chuck, is with the third point. You can't be the messenger let's say me. I can't be the messenger until I'm clear about what I believe. Otherwise, it's just loosey-goosey, right? So the more clarity I have around what's important to me, what my aspirations are, who I'm seeking to be in the world, with my family, with my friends, with my coworkers, whatever it is, the more clarity I have there, then I have more of the right, if you will, to send a message because it's grounded in something that I truly believe and have clarity about. And this is happening all the time with politicians, you know, right now in the midst of an election cycle. It doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're on. If the person's on the other side of the aisle, I'm not going to believe whatever they're saying, right? Because I don't necessarily believe them. I don't know what makes them tick, or if I do, maybe I just disagree with it. But if I don't really know, then it's really a crapshoot. So I think it's just really important to get clear about what's the most important to me. How do I want to show up in this world for others to then be influenced by me more effectively?
And being deliberate about it, being more proactive and saying, this is how I'm intentional about how I want to show up, with my family, my friends, and my business. And that's what you're saying. Values help shape, is that
Right on.
intentionality.
Yep. Yep. And let's dive into not the process yet, but the next slide. Chuck talks about. Well, first at the bottom, I'll just make a note that our listeners can access our values process or exercise process either by ordering the physical deck through our website that you see there. They're $14.95 per deck, $14.95, so they're affordable. And optionally, you can also complete it for free online on the site. I like the physical, tactile process of handling cards and moving and bucket, and that's for me, being a tactile person, a useful way to go. But the online version is solid as well. But back to values and this, guiding decision making and how we'd ideally live our lives. The other thing about values, Chuck, is that sometimes they can nudge me when I'm bumping up against my comfort zone. Knowing my values can nudge me to behave in ways that are a little bit uncomfortable for me, but that are aligned with my best self, right? So an example of that, Chuck, would be when I left American Express Financial Advisors and Ameriprise, right? So one of my values is growth. I'm not a risk taker. I was leaving a company I've been with for 24 years and going on consulting. I didn't know what lied ahead, right? But one of my values was growth. So that knowing that value, among lots of other factors, but that was one of the factors that kind of nudged me. Growth is one of my values. I'm going to go live that out. Right. Or even admitting a mistake. So one of my values is integrity. It's not comfortable to admit a mistake.
Right.
But having clarity around, what, integrity is a value of mine. I'm going to admit this mistake, even though it's uncomfortable for me to do so.
Those are great examples.
The other thing about values too, Chuck, and you know this, is they evolve over time. So the values that I would have chosen when I was 20, I'm sure would look a lot different, or at least substantially different than what they are now, at 58. So just know that these evolve over time. What we encourage people to do is go through this exercise annually, because there are times where something might come up for you that is like, okay, now that's more important to me now, and I need to make it one of my core values. For me, that was dependability. A number of years ago, I added that value because some things were happening primarily on the friend front where people were being not dependable, and it really bugged me, Chuck. And I thought, why is it bugging me? It's bugging me because that's really important to me. So I realized, I'm going to that's one of my values, is being dependable.
Right.
So they evolve over time, and doing it periodically, I think, is a good practice.
I don't imagine that many people come up with the same values, which then begs the question is, if we don't have the same values, Dave, can we work together? Can we be in a relationship, personal, or, what is that? What is having different values? Does that create conflict? What happens there?
Yeah, great question. It sure can create conflict. But I think healthy relationships, healthy organizations know that we don't have to have the exact same values. But I need to understand what your values are, back to the slide from the leadership challenge.
Sure.
So I know what you believe in, and I can respect them. They may not be most important to me, but if they're important to you, I can respect that. And then know that you're basing your decisions, your behavior, seeking to align with those values that are important to you. I will also add that if they are so different, and I've worked with teams where the values of a couple individuals were so different that it required decoupling, right, of the team, at least a team member. So it depends on the degree of alignment, but for sure, as a bottom line, there needs to be respect across all members. So great question. Another question that comes up often.
What our values are, Dave.
What's that?
So how do we discover what our values are?
Yeah, let's dive into that, Chuck, with the process slide. I'm not going to go through all of these in detail, but I'll just point out a couple things. One, a frequently asked question is, when I do this, am I thinking about these as like what I want to be, who I want to be, or who I am? And it's kind of both. So my encouragement is to have these be aspirational and realistic, so that others who know you and that you would share these with, they would say, yeah, that makes sense. I can see that in you, and I see you seeking to live those out. You don't do it all the time, but yeah, those make sense to me. As opposed to if I shared them with someone who knew me well and they said, well, good luck with that, Dave. Are you kidding me? Right? Then that's like, okay, maybe those are a little bit too aspirational.
Right.
So aspirational and realistic. The other thing is to do the steps. Don't just go to 5, right? From 50 to 5. The iterative process is important because doing it, handling those cards or thinking about those different values repeatedly helps you marinate on those and think through them and really get a sense of what's important and what's not.
Kind of a process of elimination that's valuable as you kind of whittle it down to 5.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And speaking of 5, why 5, right?
Yeah, right.
One reason is because it's memorable. I can remember 5. If 10, 15, whatever, it just becomes unwieldy. I can't remember them as easily. And if everything's important, nothing is. So this forces you to get really clear about what's most important. You might have an understanding and know what those other, maybe the top 10 are, but to be really clear about what those 5 are, so that you put some stakes in the ground, and those decisions you're making day to day, small, medium, or big, are guided by those that are most important to you. And we'll get into this in a minute, but we want to make these accessible, right? And that's key. If you have too many, it's harder to access them in the moment when the challenge is in front of you. So 5 makes sense. We have a colleague, Chuck, that he has 3. He narrowed it down to 3. Others have 6, but a handful is important.
And how long does it take somebody to work through this process? Like, what are we talking? I know you mentioned doing it every year, but how long does it take for me to get down to my 5 typically?
Yeah, I mean, the process itself, Chuck, is probably about 15 to 20 minutes doing it once. But here's the thing. We would encourage people to do it, then marinate on it for a few days, maybe even revisit it, just to make sure as they bump up against, okay, now I'm thinking about these more, is that really important, or is this other one more important, or do I need to bucket a couple of these together? Like for me, faith is one that includes religion, spirituality. By the way, faith is not a card in the deck, so feel free to make up your own that capture the essence of a concept or word or value that's most important to you. So yeah, it's doesn't take a lot. It's not a heavy lift in terms of time. It's a heavy lift in terms of the importance of it and the value it can have to your life if you do it seriously and you do it multiple times throughout your life. Again, we encourage you to do it annually.
And for our listeners to underscore what Dave's talking about is it may take you a couple of iterations of this exercise to get really clear on what your top five are. Because what will happen is once you declare your top five, you'll start to notice when you're consistent with your values and when you're not. And you'll ask yourself different questions, things like, is this really important to me? Why am I acting in this way when I said this is important? And the goal here is, again, back to what Dave was saying earlier, it's not about perfection. It is about getting clear of what's really important to me and then guiding my decision making, my behavior. So Dave, can you give us a couple of examples?
Yeah, so I'll share mine and one of my clients. So the first one is, these are my values: live with integrity, love my family, nurture my faith, seek growth, and make healthy choices. And even if those weren't on the slide, Chuck, I would be able to recite those like that because I've got them baked in, and I'll share how I do that in a moment. But as I share those, Chuck, what do you notice about those? With the,
You
what do you notice?
in front of them. It's action oriented.
Bingo, right? So it's because the words in the deck are just the word, the noun, integrity, family, faith. Well, faith is again one I made up. Growth is also one I made up. Health is in the deck, but I've made them actionable. So we encourage you to, as a next step, after you narrow it down to your top five, to add a verb, somehow make it actionable. And here's the example of a client of mine. She made it actionable, but she turned it into a sentence, which I really enjoy. She said, "Be a girl with a mind and a healthy heart. Make time for family and a belly full of laughs." Mm-hmm. And I smile every time I read that.
Sure.
Because it just makes me think of her, and it captures her essence. So the point is, if it's listing with a verb, the values like I have, or creating a sentence, or maybe even a paragraph, but you want it to be concise enough that you can recite it in your mind and access it. And that's what I want to talk about next a little bit, Chuck, is like, how do we make this live on? Mm-hmm. Right? I've shared with you in the past a situation where there are 100 teachers in a room, and 10 of them could raise their hand saying, "Yeah, I've been through a values exercise before." One or two of those people said they remembered their values. Mm. So only 1 or 2% had their values kind of committed to memory.
Sure.
And here's why that's important, because this is the life that comes. Life happens. So in the midst of life, we want to be able to access these values in the dark. And by in the dark, I mean when emotions are running high, right. I'm stressed, it's harder in those moments for me to live in alignment with my best self, with my values. And I'm going to have a harder time doing that if I don't know what they are. So I need to be able to access them in the dark when the emotions are running high, or when I'm making a big decision, or when I'm just making day-to-day choices, right? I need to be able to access those values so that I can align my behavior, or increase the degree of alignment with my values, with my behavior. And what I do,
yeah,
go ahead.
How do you keep this alive for yourself? I know you have a process.
I do, and for me, this may sound silly, but it's brushing my teeth, Chuck. Mm-hmm. So at least twice a day, I'm reciting my values. So I'm sitting or standing in the bathroom, brushing my teeth, and I'm reciting my values: live with integrity, love my family, et cetera, et cetera. So that's baking it into my DNA in a way that otherwise, trying to remember what I did a month ago or 6 months ago in terms of that exercise, this keeps it fresh so I can access it.
And how does that shape your day, Dave?
Yeah, what I think, Chuck, what it does is it just tees me up to increase the odds that I'm living in alignment with those values. It just is a reminder of this is my best self. I want to live this out. And there are days where I will commit to living out especially a single value. Others are, they're always there, but I might say, okay, today it's about making healthy choices. So I know I'm going to be tempted because we're going to be at a picnic with a bunch of other people. Maybe I'm going to imbibe, but I'm going to do so less, right? Or maybe today's the family day, and I'm going to be very intentional about writing a note, sending a message, whatever it is, doing something, an act of service for a family member. So that helps too, is just identifying something daily to be very intentional about.
And it gets back to what we were saying about the leadership logic chain. You know, you're brushing your teeth, you're improving your self-awareness around your values. That then makes them more accessible to guide your decision-making and behavior, right? I mean, is that fair?
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Otherwise, what am my choices are based on what? You know, there are probably some decent notions about being a good person, right? But okay, now I line up my choices with growth, with my faith,
Mm-hmm.
with making healthy choices, and that's not just physical, right? That's also emotional.
Yeah. Health is one of my values. I think about physical, mental, emotional, and financial health.
Yeah, right on.
You know, and so it's
I
like,
like that.
you know, it used to be just physical, but now I've included other things as
I
well.
like that.
So this guides your behavior. This guides your decision making. Any examples you want to share?
Yeah, there are a couple, Chuck, that come to mind, and one is where my values were challenged, right? So we'd rented, my cousin and I had rented a rental car, and we had a slight minor ding in this rental car. Okay, that's like, okay, it's a rental car. This is where, you know, there's an old adage, what is it? A man should never be ashamed to say he has been wrong, which is but saying in other words that he is wiser today than he was yesterday.
Mm. Mm.
You know, it's just a little ding,
Right.
right? Well, the rental company noticed it,
Sure.
right? And it's like, huh, why did I not live out my integrity value in that moment?
Sure.
And I can tell you that, so that is burned into my brain. And now I have a heightened sense of integrity. Even though that may sound like a simple little thing for many people, it was like, wow, that was a great lesson in living with integrity and doing that better next time. So that's an example on the other side of living out the value. But my living out, or actually a client, I want to share a client story. She met me at a meeting and said, Dave, you changed my life. I said, what do you mean? She said that the values exercise, I got really clear about some values. One was place. I got offered an opportunity to be promoted. And what that values exercise did was give me real clarity that place was more important than money. I chose to stay because this is where I want to be. I didn't take the money. Absent that exercise and that clarity, I think I would have moved. It's like, wow, that is so powerful that a life decision like that was made
And
because
so
of
you had good peace of mind about that decision as well.
exactly.
Yeah.
And it's tying into stress, right? The more
Mm-hmm.
clarity we have, the better we are at making those choices in alignment, and that gives us that peace of mind, and stress can
Well,
go down.
sometimes faced with an important decision like that, you know, we have some uncertainty and ambiguity in that decision. But if we know our values, and this is what I hear you saying, Dave, if we know our values, that gives us some certainty, right? Decreases the uncertainty in a decision if we know what's important to us. That then makes the choice a little clearer. It may not make it easier, but it does make it clear. It's like your decision to seek growth and leave American Express. It wasn't an easy
Right,
decision. It was a clear decision.
right on, right on. And so, you know, one of the sessions you talked about earlier, I think with Bob, was the 3 buckets.
Mm-hmm.
You know, one of the things we control is what our values are.
Right.
And amidst all the uncertainty, we can be darn certain about what our values are and seek to live more in alignment with them. Again, not being perfect, I'm my own examples of that, but it's about increasing the frequency of that.
Well, Dave, I want to thank you for sharing your wisdom and experience with us here today. It has been tremendous to hear some of the examples and how it's shaped your life and the life of the people that you work with. Our next session will be on the freeze exercise. The freeze exercise is a tool that we will introduce to help improve your self-awareness. And then, as Dave mentioned, if you notice you're not in alignment with your values, you're left with a choice to either live in alignment with those values or not. If you'd like to learn more about our firm, you can contact Kyle DeBell at Think2Perform.com or visit our website. You can either purchase the values card deck from our website at our online store or take the exercise for free and exercise that virtual card deck. If you have questions of your wealth management professional, please contact them at firstcitizens.com or via email or phone. On behalf of Dave Meldahl and myself, well, thank you for your time and attention today, and we'll look forward to revisiting our 8th session on the freeze exercise. Take care and have a good rest of your week.